Hi, I'm Ztarli, and in this video I'll be redrawing a picture I drew 10 years ago. It's an ice cream cat I drew for a calendar. So I decided to redraw this picture I drew nearly exactly 10 years ago today. You can see I've got the reference picture up to the top right is the original picture I drew. I drew 6 of these ice cream cats. I actually drew them with my friend Erica, or Carnival, or Carney. When we decided to make a calendar together. It was actually a really stressful time for me. There was a lot going on, and I was actually planning for my own wedding as well, so the whole experience was rather stressful for me, but I still really think back on that time and when I was drawing those pictures as a really important time for me, as it did actually help me finally find the painting style I always wanted to have. So this picture was like one of my real turning points. There was a bunch of them all around the same time that really helped me improve my art to a point where I was actually happy with what I was drawing instead of just being sort of meh about it. Now, my painting ability hasn't improved skill-wise that much since then. Like, I don't think I could make the picture look much better than how it looked back then. The big difference between that 10-year-old picture and this one is that the 10-year-old picture took me somewhere between 15 and 20 hours to draw, and I would just have to sit there, and I felt like it was a real chore to do, especially since I had a deadline to draw it at and the painting took me so long, where now I can sort of paint to the same ability much quicker, which is what I'm doing here. So like this picture, I think it took me 5.5 hours in total. So it's a fairly large amount quicker than the other one, and even though I changed the scene slightly, I decided to zoom in on it a bit. I didn't want to have those bare trees at the top because I thought they kind of looked silly, and the white sky I didn't think looked that good, so I decided to crop them out and reposition her and, you know, have the details larger than what I had before, which I guess does make it a bit easier to paint. But yeah, so I feel like the real difference here is my ability to paint like a bunch faster and have more fun doing it. I didn't particularly have a lot of fun painting those 10-year-old pictures, where I had heaps of fun doing this. I guess part of that is because I didn't have the stress of a time limit, but part of it is just that I'm better at painting now, as opposed, you know, I'm faster at painting than I was before, so I know I'm not going to be sitting here for 10 or 15 hours trying to get to a point that I'd be happy with the picture. I have decided to do a chibi rather than a more human-looking furry person. I just kind of find chibis way more appealing now than I did back then, and I enjoy drawing them a lot more. So I decided to update it to, you know, what I sort of draw now. If I decide to draw a person, or I decide to draw a furry or anthro, I will most likely be drawing them as a chibi. I just find them way more fun to draw, and I don't have to care about anatomy as much, so that's a plus. But yeah, I had heaps of fun doing this. I chose this particular one. I said there was 6 others, so I had like there was a strawberry one, rum and raisin, choc orange, bubblegum, this one. Is that 5 or 6? There's one more surely. What did I say? I've got bubblegum, strawberry, choc orange, rum and raisin, rainbow. I can't remember what the last one is. Oh yeah, butterscotch. I forgot because it was the most stressful out of all my pictures. I must have mentally blocked it from my mind. But the whole point of telling you all of that was to tell you that I chose rainbow because I found it the most pleasing to mix the colours together, like the 3 colours that mix together, and like I like having the blue and the yellow mixed together to form that weird green, and it just kind of reminds me of being a child and having like rainbow paddle pops as a child. And even like now, you know, sometimes we'll be walking our dogs and we'll look at the sky and it'll be these sort of colors, and we'll just be like, oh, it's like a rainbow paddle pop. So I don't know if people had rainbow paddle pops where they're from, but there definitely were a big thing for kids when I was growing up in Australia. So I guess I have a soft spot for rainbow. I did really like how my bubblegum one came out. I thought it looked pretty cool, but I definitely had more rainbow ice cream as a child than bubblegum. Another pretty big difference between how I draw now and how I drew back then is the amount of time that's divvied up between the character and the background. Back then, I probably spent just as much time on the background than I did and the details, you know, around the character than the character itself, where now I actually can get a background down pretty quickly. And instead of having like fully detailed backgrounds and then blurring them later, I tend to instead do a pretty loose background that's not very detailed, and I do usually blur them anyway. So there's not much point fully detailing a background unless the whole thing is going to be in focus. And at the end of the day, the focus of this picture is meant to be the character, not my background. I did really like how this background came out. I think the adjustments I made it look much better. I think the larger tree stumps and, you know, seeing less of the sky and that kind of thing do bring the focus back around the character a lot more. And I did make the character sort of a bit larger in the frame than the previous one overall. So I just feel like my composition for this one is a lot better, on top of, you know, taking me way less time to draw. So I was quite pleased with how this came out. I did also decide to add a bunch more petals on the ground. I'm not sure if I had like any petals on the ground from the previous picture, even though she's like catching petals falling from cherry blossoms. The other problem that my old picture had is that you could see the tops of the winter trees, and you could see they didn't have any petals, like any flowers on them, and it doesn't really make sense. So at least this way you can't see the tops of the trees, so you can imagine they're, you know, full bloom, instead of it being pretty obvious that they're not and the petals are just magically falling out of the air. Maybe it was just raining pink petals that day. If you have super keen eyes, you will also have noticed I've changed how the rainbow hair is going. Whilst I was redrawing this, I realized that I'd also done the character's hair wrong. So in my original design for this, the rainbow hair is meant to go the way I've redrawn it. You know, it's the same color as it goes to the back. But for some reason, when I drew the character on the actual artwork, once the hair goes to the back, the rainbow actually flipped sides. So instead of having, you know, pink on the right side, both front and back, it suddenly became purple when it fell to the back, which it's not really, unless she's dyeing it differently halfway down, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I kind of realized that as I was painting it, I was like, wait, hang on, this doesn't make sense. So I fixed it. So that's why if you look at both of them, you can see the hair is actually different from front to back in the original, and then when I redrew it, I decided to fix that mistake and have her hair the same color front to back as it was originally meant to be. I also decided to declutter some of her accessories, so which I'm drawing the accessories now. So I keep some of them, but I decided she didn't need the extra neck choker, and she didn't need the extra whatever that thing is around her raised arm, a tied around bracelet. I decided that wasn't really needed, didn't really add much to the picture, and with this more simplified chibi style, it made more sense to have like a few less objects to make it a bit less bitsy. I did leave the original phone I'd drawn in the bag, so that, if you can't tell, that's the end of a phone. It's the end of a flip phone, as at that point in time I had a rounded flip phone instead of, you know, the common full touchscreen phones we have now, this character would have had the older flip phones that existed back then. I was really happy with getting the month that's for rainbow, as it's September, which in Australia is the first month of spring. And I live in Tasmania, but I didn't grow up here. I actually grew up in Queensland. So for those who don't know, Queensland is in the tropics, and its seasons consist of warm and slightly less warm, with a bit of rain and thunderstorms splashed in between. So it doesn't really have defined seasons. And when I moved down to Tasmania, I really loved being able to see the different seasons, as it was one of the first places to be colonized. And when the English came over here, they brought with them a bunch of their own deciduous trees and stuff. So there's a lot of like oaks and stuff here that, you know, in autumn actually change and their leaves and lose their leaves, and there's lots of bulbs and plants that spring up from the ground in spring. And in Queensland, you just don't have that. We don't have trees like that. It's mostly gum trees and fig trees and trees that stay green all year round. And in fact, most of the vegetation is very lush and green, and you don't really have plants springing up from the ground after a long cold winter. It just doesn't, it's the tropics, so it just doesn't happen. So when I moved to Tasmania, I was really excited to witness spring for the first time and to see all these daffodils just coming up from the bare ground. So I was really happy I got to be able to draw this as the first month of spring. I was a little bit disappointed I didn't get October, since that's my birth month, but it is also Erica's birth month, so she ended up having that one and drawing her ice cream cat for that one. Yeah, I ended up with 2 spring ones and 1 winter, 2 autumns and 1 summer cat, because we sort of alternated each of the months. And yeah, so Rainbow is the September spring cat. I'd like to take this moment to thank my very first Patreon for becoming a patron and supporting me. So thank you very much, Dragon Hacks, for being the very first person to sign up to my Patreon. I super duper appreciate it. I know it doesn't sound like a big deal only having one Patreon, but it's a huge deal for me that somebody wanted to support me in that way. So for however long you're a Patreon of mine, just thank you from the bottom of my heart. It means the world to me that you decided to sign up. So thanks again, Dragon Hacks, and I look forward to drawing your commissions for you, which should be out. The videos will be out in the next couple of weeks for those ones, as long as they're happy for me to upload them. So we're pretty much done with this picture now. I'm just doing the final adjustments to the picture. So I'm trying to do this a bit more, but I'm now like to add a gradient to the top of the picture, and then I change the properties of that gradient to tie the whole thing together and sort of give it a temperature or a feel to the picture. So I wanted this to be slightly warmer, so I've used like a pink to yellow gradient to tie the whole image together. And here's the original I drew 10 years ago, and here's the finished redraw, and I'm super happy with how it came out. I like how it's slightly pinker and the positioning of the character. I thought it turned out good. Well, thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give me a like, and if you want to see more, then subscribe to my channel. I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support me. And thanks again, Dragon Hacks, for becoming my very first Patreon. Bye!